What is up, YouTube? This is Aeroplane, and I'm so excited for the launch of Path of Exile 2. There's so many classes to cook with, but I've settled on the Mercenary class just because I love the playstyle so much, and even before the full Ascendency tree was released, I've been consuming all the knowledge I can find. First, let me share my thoughts on the Ascendency which just got fully released, and that is the Witchhunter Ascendency, which looks absolutely amazing with extremely powerful Ascendency nodes. Firstly, the newly released weapon set skill point Ascendency node. And if I'm interpreting this right, these are points which provide more variable points to go more heavily into either of these archetypes, allowing you to have very distinct weapon swap skill sets, allowing you for greater investment into either defense, quality of life, clear on one end, and going into single target on the other end with a more bossing focused setup. Here's the visual interpretation of how I see the weapon swap set and how it's going to work. In summary, this node has some potential which will heavily depend on how strong the alternative nodes on the passive tree are, which we haven't been fully revealed yet. Next are the 4 more DPS aligned Ascendancy nodes. The first 2 are going to be Culling Strike and Decimating Strike connected on the same path. Culling Strike has been reworked in PoE 2, and this provides cull ranges ranging on depending on the rarity of the monsters. So that's going to be 30% for normal monsters, 20% for magic monsters, 10% for rare monsters, and 5% for unique monsters or bosses. So this is, in my opinion, extremely strong for general clear and mobbing, but relatively weaker in bosses with a 5% number. And there have been some revealed methods to be able to scale this using Cull thresholds, using Cull the Hordes notable on the passive tree, which has been revealed. Overall, I still feel that this is an underwhelming Ascendancy node, but one which you have to take to path to the next Ascendancy node, which is Decimating Strike. So this is a very interesting one. It provides a 5 to 30% direct life removal for a unique monster, which is absolutely insane. And you'll be able to see the damage number shown on the health bar depending on the randomly rolled value between 5 and 30%, which seems to bypass Energy Shield as well. This is an extremely potent node and even more useful on bosses with multiple phases like this one, and which even has a second form, and once again when it respawns it gets affected by that Decimating Strike again. Mathematically, this node in combination with Cull on unique bosses provides a range of 11% more damage up to 53.8% more damage, which averages out to something like 32.4% more damage with just these 2 Ascendancy nodes. Not a great number, not an insane number, but something which is pretty good, and even better against normal monsters, magic monsters, just for your mapping with Cull and Decimating Strike combined. For you nerds out there and how I got these numbers, looking at the baseline of a boss with 1000 HP, and if you're able to do 100 base DPS, that's going to amount to 10 seconds to kill the boss. If you rolled a low roll Decimating Strike of 5%, that's going to be a total of 10% of the HP removed, and that's going to be 900 HP that you need to deal damage to kill the boss. And that's going to be with the same amount of DPS, allowing you to deal 1000 damage in 9 seconds instead of 10, giving you an effective damage number of 111 DPS, amounting to 11.1% more damage. And for the Cull and the strong Decimating Strike, removing 35% of the boss life with 30% Decimating Strike. That means that you only need to kill the boss dealing 650 damage, giving you an effective damage of 153, which amounts to 53.8% more damage. So that is some pretty insane numbers. And in my opinion, these nodes are great for mobbing and provide significant damage increases against the weaker mob types. And keep in mind that these numbers are somewhat on the low end that I'm expecting from 2 Ascendancy points, which are pure DPS nodes for the build. But one caveat here is also that Decimating Strike deals a lot of front-loaded damage, 30% upfront up to, and towards the tail end of the boss fight, they typically enrage, which makes it a little bit more difficult, but that's just something to keep in mind. Next up are the next 2 DPS aligned Ascendancy nodes, and that is Witchbane and No Mercy Ascendancy. Pairing with the other Ascendency node, they should always be used in tandem together because the next node is what makes the first one so much stronger, and without it, it just doesn't make sense. And this allows you to apply a new stat on an enemy which you can interact with by dealing damage, and that is called concentration. Simply put, concentration on a mob is 40% of its life, and upon dealing that 40% damage to the monster, you effectively remove the concentration completely. And to do that, you need to constantly produce hit damage within a 5-second window, and eventually they'll have no concentration left after dealing 40% damage. From what we know, reducing the enemy's concentration will lower their cooldown recovery rate, and I imagine this will increase the amount of time between they will be able to use their mechanics. And this provides you with more DPS uptime, which is kind of like an intangible number that you can put your finger on. No Mercy is a simple one, providing a range of scaling between 0 to 30% more damage depending on the amount of concentration that the monster has left, and it is a must take that I mentioned earlier if you take the first Ascendency node. The possible interactions here will be using Decimating Strike, which may contribute to the reduction in concentration with a single hit up to 30%, and just by dealing that 10% more, allowing you to fully deplete the concentration of the enemy, allowing you to have the maximum 30% more damage taken from the Ascendency node. And once you proc this, allowing you to be able to deal more damage. However, this is a tricky mechanic, observing that bosses have phases and their life breakpoints, in my opinion, would be very hard to keep an uptime of. If the boss does a phase which makes them invulnerable or have an iframe for more than 5 seconds, which in this example you will be, it's going to be very tricky to be able to keep up your concentration reduction uptime, and they will gain back that concentration, which means you don't do the more damage. So in my opinion, this is going to be slightly weaker, and dealing damage over time will not contribute to removing the concentration, and you will need to constantly be dealing damage. And given how these boss fights look, especially before we are acquainted with their mechanics, it's going to be a very challenging proposition. So this is something that I possibly would respect to if I were to go into a pinnacle boss or an endgame boss. But when it comes to overall mapping, I think this is something that I will not be personally taking. Next up is a more defensive-oriented Ascendency, providing a new buff stat called Sorcery Ward. In summary, it provides a shield that takes elemental damage based on the sum total of your armor and evasion of the build, and the downside of having 50% less armor and evasion on your build. You would be familiar with this stat from Primal Aegis, from the Elementalist Bastion of Elements Ascendency, or the Elemental Aegis that you get from Magna Eclipses from PoE 1. And here they are. With Sorcery Ward, this could turn into an extremely potent method of scaling elemental damage ages, depending on the methods of scaling armor and evasion that are available in the game that we have not seen yet. Affixes on Flask got removed. We don't know if that's going to be transferable to the charms that we have available today, and we have not seen any armor evasion notables yet on the south side of the tree. That's where Mercenary will be starting, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are whole build archetypes that could scale around this, depending on the methods of scaling available. In PoE 2, the passives from the Ascendancies can be further supported by gems, which can make them a lot stronger, but we have to wait and see what we can achieve with the new armor and evasion values. With the modest PoE 1 endgame values of, let's say, 20,000 armor and 20,000 evasion on a champion build, for example, this will allow you to be able to get a reduced post-reduction, 10,000 armor and 10,000 evasion after the 50% reduction, and this effectively allows you to achieve 6,000 ward. And this number is absolutely insane and unheard of in PoE 1 value terms, because with Magna Eclipses, it only provides a 1,000 elemental ages with a 10-second cooldown, and Bastion of Elements provides between typically 2,000 to 2,500 with the builds that I've played so far, with the Primal Aegis with 5-second cooldown on the Elementalist. I imagine this will be an extremely good method of scaling defenses, especially against endgame bosses, which in PoE 1 primarily do elemental damage. think Uber Eater, Uber Exile, they do huge amounts of elemental damage. And I imagine that in Path of Exile 2, apart from maybe Chayula or some form of chaos damage that you'll be taking, this sorcery ward will be extremely, extremely powerful. I do want to caveat the two downsides of Sorcery Ward. First being that the recharge delay is currently teased to be at this 9.4 seconds at level 7, which I imagine to be 8.1 seconds at the max level. Here are some calculations. And this can be reduced further using ceremonial ablution with the faster recovery and the 50% more ward. Secondly, the second downside is going to be that obvious 50% less armor and evasion, which gives you less mitigation against physical hits. Saving the best for last, and that's Zealous Inquisition, which was the main reason why I've leaned towards the Witchhunter Ascendency and hence the Mercenary class. And that is the PoE 1 Softcore Blaster must-have stat, and that is Explodey Node. So you're able to achieve 10% chance to explode on kill, dealing 100% of the life as physical damage. And this is doubled on Undead and Demons, and this node looks absolutely amazing. It's even better on things like Beyond, for example, that they have mentioned in the video. Zealous Inquisition was the main reason why I wanted to play Witchhunter, but we'll have to see what Gemling Legionnaire has because not all the nodes have been revealed yet. But definitely this is nothing much more to be said. This is just classic explode and it's something that I will definitely take, especially while mapping. But just to caveat, this provides no additional damage for bossing and is something that potentially, depending on the cost, that you'll want to respec before doing the endgame pinnacle content. In my next video, I'll be covering exactly what I've theory crafted for early access. And so if you like and you want to see that, do feel free to like, share, subscribe to see more content like this, and follow me on Twitch as well, as I'll be streaming Path of Exile 2 on early access launch. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye.